do not worry alone. Do not worry alone. And that means you have to tell someone about how you are truly feeling. So take the mask off, that mask that we live with all the time, trying to cope with the pressures of school, university, relationships with family or boyfriend, girlfriend, or decisions around your sexuality, decisions around where you're going in this world. There's so much going on in that pinnacle 18. You start to drive, you start to drink, people start looking upon you as an adult, all that sort of stuff. If you're worrying alone through that, it makes it so much more difficult. So tell someone, find that one person who's got you for life that you can talk to, warts and all, without any judgment.
In 1837, Horace Mann created the education system, a system at the time designed to pump out factory workers and professors. The same system that is still being used today in the 21st century. Now, Mann's system is backfiring. We are being moulded by the same industrial system that has existed for close to 200 years. That system delivers us into a digital economy that has no need of our outdated skills. This isn't our teachers' fault. This isn't the government's fault. This is due to a rapidly changing world full of technology and unforeseen circumstances. And us Gen Zs are caught in the middle. Welcome to the Driven Young podcast, the podcast for stressed, overwhelmed young Australians, teaching you practical life skills you can implement now to set yourself up in life. And now your host, Byron Dempsey.
Welcome back to the Driven Young podcast, and today is an amazing episode from Mr Gus Rowland. A compassionate bloke, Gus wears his heart on his sleeve, but that heart was shattered the day news arrived that Angus, his friend, mentor and father figure, had taken his own life. Angus seemed to have it all, a beautiful family, home, great job, the respect and friendship of many, but he had something else too, inner worries that were eating him away, and he never told anyone about it. The stigma around masculinity stopped too many from reaching out and asking for help when life felt tough. Gus was driven to action. In 2016, he hosted a 3-part documentary series, Man Up, lifting the lid on the relationship between masculinity, social isolation, mental health, and suicide. Now, who is Gus? Well, I feel like this quote sums him up pretty well. I want a society where everyone has a Gotcha4Life Mate, that go-to person you can open up to and rely on about anything. A world where we can seek help when life gets challenging, where we can build open and honest relationships and feel comfortable expressing ourselves no matter what, so no one has to worry alone. Gus is a father of 3 and runs the Gotcha4Life Foundation with one very specific goal: 0 suicides. In today's episode, we're talking about mental health and how you shouldn't fight this battle alone, why we need connections as humans, and how you can start to build better connections with the people in your life. Now, to preference this episode, this is a bit of a COVID episode right now. At the time of recording this in Sydney, we are on week 10 of lockdown, hardcore lockdown. You're not allowed to see anyone. You're allowed to see like one person at a time outside of your home. I have barely left my house in 10 weeks. It's been really brutal. A lot of stuff in my life is shut down. And so this episode is going out to people who are in lockdown as well, or anyone who's going through a tough time. But hopefully this can provide a little bit of support, because right now in Australia it feels a little bit hopeless. We've been locked down for 10 weeks and we're getting more cases every single day. It doesn't seem to be any real hope. So hopefully this episode has a bit of shining light for you guys and you enjoy it. As per usual, please DM me on Instagram if you enjoy the show. Consider leaving a review, and on a lighter note, my book is coming out, or my book, depending on when you listen to this, is already out. It is called 18 and Lost, So Will We. It would mean the world to me if you got a copy. The link is in the show notes below. Also, you'll notice we jump into a conversation with Gus. I decided to show the conversation before we hit record, so about 10 minutes before. It's just me and him talking, get to know each other. It shows a little bit of behind the scenes of how I start my episodes, and also a little bit about COVID. There's no political stuff here with COVID. It's just, talking about how to deal mentally with it when you're feeling quite alone. So, over to Gus. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Not for the first time, brother.
There you go. How you going, Gus?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, mate. How are you going?
Yeah, I think I'm doing as well as you can during lockdown. It's taking a lot of the wind out of my sails. I think had a lot of projects I was working on, and they all got slammed down. So yeah, but I'm doing well. Getting into the rhythm of it now, and accepting it's going to be another few weeks. So, how about yourself?
Yeah, very much the same. A lot of hard work's gone into a lot of events that through no one's fault now need to be postponed, and you'll gather the momentum again, but it just takes effort, doesn't it? And at the moment we're all a bit jaded, and I spend a lot of time talking to people about just building their mental fitness up so they can get through this. And that takes a bit of a toll on me at times. But, doing the best I can, mate, just like you. It's just a matter of hanging in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And because similar to you, I work with a company called Empower You, and we do a life skill program for teenagers. And so that's been completely shut down. And that's just, a lot of momentum's been lost from that. And it's like, we know we'll pick it back up, but it still hurts regardless.
Oh, of course. Sorry, I just noted the old vacuum in the background there.
That's right.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like you need a finishing line to keep building the hope. So you keep talking, you keep explaining that it'll end. This is not going to be the way it's going to be forever. But if you don't have a finishing line, and we don't at the moment, it's hard for people to go, righto, that's the end point. So until we get that end point, and I'm actually going to do a video later today around, why don't we have the 11 o'clock news conference where they talk about what the percentage is of vax.
Yeah.
How many vax are coming into the country. If we get this amount of vaccine and we keep going with the same amount of momentum with the vaccination, we will be at that 70% on this day. And all of a sudden people are like, okay, well, if I go and book a bit earlier, if I go Astra rather than Pfizer, I can maybe make that a bit quicker. And enough people do that. It just might be a more positive swing. Otherwise, you can pretty much just change the numbers, but the same words are coming out of the premier, the medical people, the politicians, the police guy every day. And it's just soul destroying. And once the Olympics are over, and then we have the Paralympics, which will be good for a certain period of time. And then what have we got to look forward to? At the moment, that's been a great distraction for a lot of people.
It's just brutal. And the whole, if it bleeds, it leads in the media, right? If all you do is watch the media, you'd be a very sad person. You'd have a very negative outlook on life. And I don't even watch the conferences. I try to avoid the media. There's enough COVID talk going around. I'm just like, I just want to focus on what I'm focusing on, because it eats away you slowly, just hearing those numbers every day. And it's like, you're staying at home, you're obeying all the rules, and the numbers are still going up. And it's like,
Well, this morning I went for a walk, took the dog for a walk, met with a mate of mine, which is what we're allowed to do. We're wandering around and stuff. It was like Piccadilly Circus up on the headland at Longreef. We decided not to get any. We just got a cup of coffee at like a roadside, like a mobile coffee guy, chatting away with him. How's everything going? Blah, blah, blah. So we're walking, and there's 5 blokes, that just, your age group, and they're all just sitting, having an egg and bacon roll and a coffee, and they couldn't have been closer. And I'm like, that's good for their mental health. But boys, if you're going to do that, you've got to spread out.
Yeah.
You've got to show as if you give it a little bit of a shit. Like, this is zero care factor to anything. And I just sort of thought, well, if that's what everyone's doing, and they're doing it everywhere, when will we ever get to the bottom of this? And we just need to take it a bit more seriously until we get those numbers up. And then, then we're up and at 'em, I reckon. We open up the world like the rest of the world has.
Yeah. And do you know what the crazy thing is? Because we're seeing people like that, they'll post it on the Instagram story as well. And it's like, mate, if you're going to break the rules, at least don't share it to the world.
It just shows that the headspace is just nowhere near where it's got to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, listen, do we have a time limit?
Yeah, I've got about half an hour.
All right. Well, let's jump into it then. Why don't we?
Sure.
We'll just keep everything relevant to young people. A big reason I started this podcast is because I'm seeing a huge spike in mental health, depression, anxiety for young people. And, I believe if we can attack that within the education system at school, we can help, focus on mental health and those issues at an earlier age rather than, advanced science and mathematics, which we'll probably never really use. In my opinion, that's more, fundamental life skills that are actually going to help increase young people's well-being. So, that's really one of many reasons I started this podcast. So that's why I'm excited to talk to you today. So let's just dive into it. You ready?
Sure.
All right. Gus, welcome so much to the podcast.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, really excited. We're going to be talking, I guess, about mental health and, the well-being of young people today, which is something I'm very passionate about and I think is very important. Before we get into, I guess, the meat of it and maybe some tactical stuff and tips that you think people can be doing to improve their mental health, I'd love to just know real quickly your story. Why do you do what you do? And specifically, I'd love to always find out what people did after high school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, the reason why I'm working in the mental health space, or what I like to call mental fitness space, because I think mental fitness is a better way to describe it, because it's a bit like your physical fitness. There's days where you can run a marathon and other days you can't get off the sofa. And I think we should normalize that discussion and realize that it's human to have these feelings and so forth. And you're always working on your physical fitness. Well, we should be working on our mental fitness at the same time. And I really learned a lot. I'm 52 now. I started a show called Man Up on the ABC, which you can still see on ABC iView. We've just ticked over 96 million views. We gave it away to the world. And it was really my journey on why a friend of mine had taken his own life. And that's why I'm involved in this, because I took it on initially to find out why my mate had done what he did. But I soon realised, Byron, that I suppose I had a passion for making sure no one else had to go through the sadness and the emotions that I went through, and also the ripple effect that ripped through the whole community when my friend took his own life. And I challenged masculinity, really, and found out why we're trying to live up to a really very, very difficult set of rules that were set so long ago. Perhaps we could look at those rules and realise that some of them are fantastic, but some of them are just not for today. So we need to relook at those. So I decided to start a foundation called Gotcha4Life, and I want everyone to have someone who is gotcha for life. You can have that conversation with warts and all without any fear of judgment, and you can have that conversation with someone so you don't worry alone, because I truly believe that suicide is a death of loneliness. And I think we get to the point where we don't feel that we can talk to people about our true feelings, because we live in this world where everyone's trying to be perfect. Everyone's got this mask on, making out that life is wonderful, when truly underneath it all, we're just being human and we are struggling. We should be able to talk about that stuff as openly as everything else. So I'm trying to start that discussion without the white coat, without the medical terms, without the wellness term, and really talk about mental fitness and normalize that conversation. And for me, it's the most important conversation we can have before COVID, let alone coming out of COVID or being in lockdown, or looking at the next few years and how we're going to bounce back from this. So that's my life now. And I support anyone that works in the suicide preventable space, because I think there's way too much focus on the crisis point and not enough in educating people on what it takes to be a man and a woman today at school, so they can actually come out of school with some really, really great education and learnings to be able to not worry alone. And I think that's really key. And going back to your second question, I finished school in 1986. That makes you feel really old now. And I went on a gap year to England and had an absolute ball, farted ass around really, and had a great time. Came back then and did public relations and marketing, then went back to England because I was chasing a young lady who's now my wife.
Oh, really?
We went back and forth, for a while, because it was a bit harder back then there was no mobile phones. It was all
Sending
writing
letters.
And,
this is exactly what my parents said, actually. My mum went to Norway for a gap year, and then her and dad were messaging, sending letters back and forth.
Yeah, and it takes a week or two for you to get the letter, and then by then all the information's changed. And when you eventually decided to make a phone call, it was like £1 a minute, which back at the time was like $3 a minute. And, I was only earning £50 a week. And I was like, I've only got really £10 to budget for this phone call. And of course, you always went longer, and you hang up, no, you hang up, no, you hang up, and all that stuff. But eventually we settled back here in Australia, and I've had many different sort of lives, I suppose, up until I was 38. And that's when I got the opportunity to do some TV and then radio. And then that gave me the chance to do the doco Man Up. And, now my life at 52 is a father of 3 teenagers, still with the same lady that I chased to England. And she works in Gotcha4Life with me. So I understand the pressures that young people are going through. I've got a son that's in his 3rd year at uni. He's only been to university for 1 week in all that time. I've got a daughter at the moment doing HSC, and she doesn't know if the trials are going to happen. She doesn't know if the exams are going to happen. She actually hasn't been properly taught at school for months, and her 5th form was very much the same. So I'm certainly feeling the pressures, Byron, that young people are going through, and I talk to them all the time in terms of trying not to put too much pressure on yourself, and talk to parents about not putting too much pressure from them onto their children, because their kids and my kids are living in a very different world to the one that we were living in. So that old school way of looking at things, I don't think works anymore. So, that's why I get asked to do lots of podcasts, and I wanted to do yours because it was focused on young people. And I think at the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty in young people, and they need to hear that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to bumble through life a bit at the moment. You don't need to have everything ticked and made sure that everything is like old school refined. It's just a matter of being a bit organic at the moment.
Absolutely. And I mean, fact is, very few people know what they're doing. 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds. I've had 50-year-olds on this podcast. So like, I'm 50 and I still don't know what I'm doing.
Mate,
and it's like,
I was 48 and I was wondering what I'm going to do. I was nearly 10 years into breakfast radio, and you'd look at my life and go, well, he's on breakfast radio. He's got a TV show. And, I was coming home and going, I wonder what I'm going to do next. And I wonder if I'm doing a good job, waiting for someone to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, okay, mate, thanks for coming along, but you're not good enough. I mean, they're the things that mums and dads of the kids that will be listening to this podcast will be going through. But most of us are told not to show that vulnerability because that shows a weakness. Where I'm saying to all the parents at the moment, let your kids know that we're all battling every day. And make it normal for them to feel that they haven't quite got all their shit together. And that's okay. We will work this out together. Please don't try to do it by yourself.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so much to unpack here. But it's crazy how much of what you just said, it is like so much about what my podcast is all about. Like I harp so much on like the one thing that has radically changed my life and improved my mental health was having better relationships around me. Like that just skyrocketed. I've got such good friendships now, and that just, took me to the next level. So like whenever, like even the other day, as simple as this, I was driving to Canberra before COVID hit. This was literally the week before Sydney COVID hit. I was driving to Canberra and I had like 3 hours to kill. And for about 3 hours, I just called all of my friends and we just spoke for like 20 to 30 minutes each. And I spoke to like 6 people, had these amazing conversations. And I was just like, I could have just been listening to music, but instead I had these great conversations. I felt so great afterwards. But by the time I arrived, I sat in my car for 45 minutes because I was still on the phone with my best mate who I hadn't spoken to because he's in he's in some other country doing some crazy stuff. And so it's just like, even something little like that just improves, your mental health, which is why I love your whole, I guess, concept of you don't have to be alone and the importance of being alone, the whole importance of not being alone and having good quality relationships around you.
Exactly. It's about putting in the effort, right? That's why I talk about mental fitness. Like you can't just get fit sitting on the sofa, but you really used your emotional muscle by making that phone call, deciding not to listen to music or a podcast or just sitting in a bit of silence. Because sometimes people like you and me, Byron, who are communicating all the time, we need to have a little bit of silence.
For sure.
We need to have that moment where you're just settled, right? So you could have used that for that, but you decided to use a bit of emotional muscle, make the phone call and have a conversation of gravity. Bit of banter in there, of course, but there would have been a moment there where you were really true and honest with your friends and they would have been truly honest with you. And it may not have been that you needed it, but they might have needed it. And that's what I keep saying to people. Make the effort with your friends. Don't take any relationships for granted. And you don't need to have a 20 or 30-minute conversation that you had. Like that's huge. But just sending a text message and saying, hey, I love you. I'm thinking about you. Hope you have a great day. Kiss, hug, kiss, hug. And just send it and send that to 10 people in your contact list. And people come back and go, you okay? What are you texting me for? That's a bit weird. You say you love me. I go, yeah, I'm just checking in because I don't want to take any of my relationships for granted. And if you can't write that text message or make that phone call that you had, then let those people go, and then focus in on a smaller group of people and make sure those relationships are at a level of deepness that you can have that conversation when you need to. And it doesn't mean you burst into tears every 5 minutes or have a deep and meaningful conversation every time you talk, but it allows you to have that depth of conversation or connection if you need to. And that's the key, When I speak to so many older blokes, like dads in particular of your podcast listeners, those dads are struggling at the moment to have the conversation with you younger guys. We don't quite have the vocab. We've still got this old school that we're the dad, we're in charge, we're like, what are you doing with your life? And, it just seems to us to be a little bit, you guys haven't quite all got your stuff together. The thing is, we've got to sit in that and actually ask you and talk to you and realize that you guys are going through a very different experience than we ever did. And that takes taking your ego out as an adult and realizing that it's not okay to do what our dad did to us. Yeah. We're living in a very different world now. And that's why blokes of my age should be sponges, listening to guys like you, listening to our kids. And sometimes that's going to be hard. There's going to be some vulnerable silence. There's going to be moments where you feel out of control. And that, of course, is nowhere where blokes of my age want to be. But we have to sit in that uncomfortableness to earn the right to have that conversation, to make sure that our kids feel safe around us to talk to us about anything.
Yeah, it's such an important point. And I talk about it, like, I think if you look at like my generation, my dad and my granddad, like the emotional disconnect from my granddad is insane. Like, I've never really seen him show too much emotion. Go to my dad, he's still, you can see it passed down, and then you can see he's passed it down to me, and we've incrementally gotten better and better.
Yeah.
But it's something I've still, and I want to unpack it a lot more in the future of what I do for young men. Something I still struggle with as well. Even though I talk about it on the podcast, deep down I do struggle with it. And my first and my most viral video ever on TikTok, which really blew up this podcast, it got about 20 million views, or 20 to 30 million views. It went super viral. It was a clip with a guy called Lee True, who I should introduce you to. I think you guys would connect really well. And he runs bush retreats for men out in the bush to connect you with nature. And he talks all about mental health, and you had no food. You've got to, no clothes really. You've got like shorts, and you got to like cut your firewood, make shelter and everything. It's a great experience. And he talked about, the importance of men showing emotion, and how I think Brene Brown says that, showing emotion isn't vulnerability, it's a strength.
Yeah.
And how important flipping that wording is for young men specifically, but young women as well.
Oh, look, for absolutely everyone. If there's one thing I've worked out, the Man Up program for me was focused on my friend and why he took his own life. And that's why we called it Man Up. And we talk at the end about man up, speak up, rather than man up, shut up, which is obviously what your dad and granddad would have been taught all these years ago. So it's about changing that around. And at the end of the Man Up program, we have this beautiful shot coming up high, if you can imagine it, coming up high down to a baby crying. And it's very natural. You imagine the baby needs its nappy changed, it needs some cuddling, or it needs some food. And then all of a sudden it flips up and it's a 5-year-old boy. And you go, well, that's actually seems pretty cool as well. That's normal. And then there's like a 10-year-old boy, and you start going, oh, I wonder why he's crying. And then a 15-year-old boy, and you're like, oh, and it goes to a 25, a 35, and then a 50-year-old. By the time you get to the 50-year-old, you're going, what's this bloke crying for? Like, come on, mate. You're better than that. Just fucking deal with it, And it soon hits you. You go, oh, my God, we never see men cry except when their team wins the footy or at a funeral. We've got permission then for whatever reason. In the stereotype allows us to cry here. That's the rule. And you soon realise if a bloke just shows emotion, it's looked upon as a weakness. It looks upon this bloke's got to really lift. And then you realise, of course, that we lose 7 blokes a day every day. We lose 3 a day ladies. 75% of suicides are men. But when it comes to attempts of suicide, we have nearly 65,000 a year. That's 1 every 28 seconds attempt. And most of those are women. So we've been chatting now for 17 minutes since we came on the Zoom at 9 o'clock our time. So there's been nearly 35 people attempt suicide in Australia in that time you and I have been chatting.
Wow.
So, and most of those are women.
Because of COVID right now.
Well, you know what? There's so many people at the moment that are alone, and I keep saying we're only physically disconnected. We are not emotionally disconnected. So we need to keep using technology like you and I are chatting at the moment. Normally we'd probably meet up to have a conversation, but we can't have that at the moment. So
I do all my podcasts in person usually. This week is the first time I've had to do online interviews. So perfect example.
There you go. But technology works. It really does work. So we need to understand that it works. We need to embrace it. And we need to make sure that the people that we love in this world, we stay connected with and use that technology. Send them a text message, FaceTime them, call them, email them, however you want to contact them, just let them know that you're thinking about them. And you might be in a brilliant space yourself at the moment, Byron, but there might be some people in your world that you love that are worrying alone at the moment. So all of a sudden you just go, you know what? I'm here for you. Show some vulnerability yourself, talk about your day, good and bad. And all of a sudden people just go, you know what? I'm not alone. And I'm not alone dealing with the stuff, good and bad. I'm going through a human experience at the moment, and that's okay. And Byron, who knows stuff, is doing the same thing. So that makes me feel better. We always feel better in a tribe, a team, a crew, whatever you want to call it. We're so much better in those situations. So this time right now is all about putting that line in the sand and making a list, phoning them up, texting them, communicating with them, making sure they're not worrying alone, because worrying alone, especially us blokes, we make some really shit decisions based around not being able to verbalize stuff. Whatever's going on our melon is not good if you don't talk about it.
Yeah, it's so important. I think, I've got international listeners, but like right now, you and I are in Sydney and we're stuck in a hardcore lockdown. We're approaching week 10. Like it's been brutal.
Yeah.
It's been really rough. And so this message is more important now more than ever. I also think when it comes like to speak, I guess almost on behalf of Gen Z, I'm seeing a lot of young people. It's bizarre. I don't know if I can articulate it quite right, but they want to reach out to people, but they don't. It's like they care about these friends, but they just, for some reason, they don't want to make the effort. And they might be like, I've seen this thing going around on TikTok where it's like, if you stop messaging your friends and then you notice they never message you, that's a one-way relationship. And I go, that's true. But also there's no harm in just messaging them. Maybe there's a reason they didn't message you. Maybe you take ownership and you go, you know what? They're not messaging me. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe not.
Exactly.
I might be wrong, but it doesn't hurt to try.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's time, leadership's got to come through vulnerability, right? So you just keep leading. You know this information. You know it's better. You keep in contact and you just keep going. You keep moving. If the relationship is worth something, a couple of people not getting back to you, well, get over it, and just keep going and keep going. Most young people that I talk to, Byron, at the workshops that we do, they want to have the conversation, but they don't have the words to have the conversation. So the words are getting stuck in the throat. So we need to give them the words to start that vulnerable conversation. So it's easy to talk about school, uni, relationships, just off the cuff stuff, weather. Oh, what about this lockdown? Oh, what about 11? We can easily just find stuff to talk about.
Like surface level conversations.
Yeah. I talk banter compared to gravity. A conversation of gravity is the one you have where it really actually means something. We live in banter 95% of the time, and no one wants to change that. We love talking sport. We love talking just stuff. It just makes us feel comfortable. It makes us feel in control, and that's where we want to be. We've got to have enough emotional muscle to get fit enough to be able to have that conversation of gravity when you need to have the conversation of gravity. And that's the key. And when I talk to blokes of your dad's age and my age, it's like we don't have to burst into tears every 5 minutes. We need to just have that tool in our toolbox at the right time to have that conversation. And that's the key. And no one's trying to change too much. We just need to tinker a little bit, because otherwise we're going to continue with these numbers. And the numbers are horrific, as I already stated. So Gotcha4Life is speaking about 0 suicides. One's too many. So to get that rate down to 0, we're going to need to change what it takes to be a man and a woman today compared to when the rules were set, which means we change the rules a little bit. We don't bury our emotions. We talk openly. It's not weak to speak. It's actually the strength to do it. And to bury your emotions and walk away is actually weak compared to sitting in that moment and going, you know what? I'm out of control, but I'm going to tell someone how I feel. That's the real strength. But like everything, I spoke to my dad, who's never told me he's loved me. He's nearly 80 and, he's real old school. And his dad and my grandfather was the same, just as your situation was. And I just he said to me, I love what you're doing. But he said, it's like turning around the QE2. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take some generations. And I was like, well, okay, that might be the case. But Byron, your generation will be better than my generation. And then your son or daughter's generation will be better. And eventually people will go, oh, that's what we do now.
Yeah.
We just have to keep on the front foot. We need to keep humanizing the situation, taking away the clinical look at it, taking away the mental health tag, talking about mental fitness, talking about human stuff, good, bad, indifferent, ups and downs that happen when you're a human, should be looked upon as normal.
Yeah.
And it is normal to be human. And let's throw away perfect, throw away that bullshit social media, Instagram life, and realize that the people that we truly love in this world should never have to worry alone. If they're worrying alone, then that's on us, not being a good enough friend.
That's it. It's a whole take ownership. Yes, they might not be reaching out to you. And yes, you could go, well, they're a bad friend. It's totally valid. However, how does that benefit your relationship? It doesn't. So take ownership. I also just wanted to, I guess, kind of almost echo what you were saying. I do a lot of presenting now, and I have a whole story. Probably my personal opinion is my most emotional story. It's about a 10-minute story, but the crux of it is I've seen my dad cry once in my entire life. And it was when I did a camp at 15 years old, and we were surrounded by 50 other men in a big tent. It wasn't when I saw him at his mother's funeral or all these other spots. It was in a space with 50 other men. And so how can that happen? it's because we were in a safe space and people were being vulnerable. And so everyone was opening up. And it's one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And it's like, if that's what you're doing at your workshops, and if that's what's happening around Australia through, I guess, what I'm trying to do and what you're trying to do and what these other people I'm connecting with are trying to do, the ripple effects of that can be huge. And hopefully, as you mentioned, we can really affect a lot of people, and next generations down, they'll look at us and go, what were these people doing? Like, what was wrong with these men back in the day?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the men of the day were doing what they thought was best.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And that's why I always say, don't bag your granddad or your dad. They were doing what they thought was best, what the set of rules were back then. We know more stuff now.
Yeah.
We understand it more. So it's up to us now. If we don't do anything with that information, that's on us.
Yeah.
But we're doing stuff with this information. Awareness has never been better. The problem is, Byron, we still don't have enough action behind the awareness. And that's where, what I'm trying to do at Gotcha4Life, what you're doing with your podcast, and so many other wonderful people are out there doing great stuff. Awareness has never been better. We just need to keep on going with the action behind it. But I'm pleased you told me that story about your dad, and you're absolutely right. The last workshop we did was at Avalon Surf Lifesaving Club. We had 257 men turn up on a Monday night, and the night started with a 16-year-old boy telling a beautiful story, and it finished with a 76-year-old man standing up and saying how proud he was of the room and the fact that he'd never been in a room and he lived here all his life.
Wow.
And he just couldn't believe how we could be so nasty to each other on the roads in the local area, how people were beeping each other for car parks. People were rushing in front of other people to get a coffee in the morning. But really, when we all slowed down enough, we realized that we're all going through stuff, and being kind and being a human was actually really wonderful if you built up a safe enough place to have that conversation. And that's what we need to do, slow down enough to realize that we're all just doing our best. We're all bumping around in the dark looking for the light switch.
That's
and that's okay. That really is okay at the moment, and just do your bloody best. And once you build that safe environment, us men will talk to the cows come home. And, when blokes go to the workshop and their missus say to me, I'm so glad my husband went and we've had this conversation. I don't know where it's come from. I said, it's always been in us to talk.
Yeah.
The thing is that we've never given ourselves the safe enough space to do it.
And it's so true. Like, even I agree with everything you're saying. It's something I'm passionate about, but still there's a part of me when I feel those emotions coming up, my immediate reaction is to suppress them. And I don't know why. I don't know why. And I don't know. You can't explain why it's difficult. Like, I totally understand why women look at men and go, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Because it doesn't make any logical sense, but it's just how I feel.
Well, going back to the mental fitness space, if you started jogging today, I don't know if you're an athlete or you look thin, you look fit, down the camera. But at some stage, if you started running or started doing weights or doing a class or whatever it might be, you would get to a point where you're out of breath or you're feeling uncomfortable. Well, that's exactly the same as you trying to suppress stuff. Is like, it's just a natural thing that comes to you. So what do? You stop, you work it out, you get fitter, you'll be able to work through it. Exactly the same with our mental fitness. You go, why am I doing that? Okay, the fact that you've caught it is great. Secondly, you go, okay, well, I've caught it. I'm putting that to the side and I'm going to tell someone how I feel about it. You know what? It's nothing worthwhile ever comes easy.
Yeah.
So you just got to keep grinding through. And that's why I love the mental fitness word rather than mental health, because it gives you a positive spin to be able to talk about that you're working on it. And some days will be 2 out of 10 and other days will be 10 out of 10. And that's just, we're just a work in progress.
We also understand for fitness, like, in order to be fit, it takes a lot of work and it's going to take time, just like your mental health. So I think it's a perfect analogy. Yeah. But I am cautious of time. Before I get into the final question, I did just want to challenge listeners, because I did this at a presentation once and you said it before, but I wanted to go back to it. Just message people, especially now in lockdown. So what I would challenge people to do is go onto Instagram, click on who you follow and just flick through it randomly, pick a random person, and then just message them, hey, hope you're having a great day. And do that to a bunch of people and see what happens from it. I guarantee you, magical stuff happens from it. It can be very, very beautiful. You never know what's going to happen. It takes you a few minutes. So that's what I would challenge people to do, especially if you're stuck in lockdown. I think that's a great exercise.
Byron, I do exactly the same thing at the end of my prezos. I say, write this text message. I said, find someone in your contact list you haven't spoken to in 3 months. So it's not someone you speak to regularly. Go to a text message and send them exactly this text. I love you. And there's no bullshit emojis. It's the proper wording. I love you. I miss you. see you soon, kiss, hug, and just send it. And people are like, oh no, because they've just randomly picked someone in their contact list. And I say, I promise you, and then we'll sit in total silence. The first time I did this at a presentation I did at the ICC. There was 12,500 people there. And we sat in total silence. I said, turn on your buzzers, your vibrates, your ding-dings, everything, and let's just wait for the responses. And it takes about 30 seconds in a room of that size.
Yeah.
And I say, let's get the microphone out to that person. And you get either, was this for me? Are you drunk? What are you doing? Or people phone. They're really like, what's this all about? That's weird. Because when you say, I love you, I miss you, look forward to seeing you soon, it's a different type of conversation starter. It's a great connection starter. It makes people have a bit of a giggle and a laugh, but it's all about connection, right? This world. We're much better as people when we're connecting. So do that, on a Friday at 3:00, send it off to 5 random people, just like you did. But if you send that message, it's just a slightly awkward one, and it'll start people going, what's this all about? And if they're in your contact list and you haven't spoken to them for 3 months, it's probably a chance is that you haven't really given that friendship the type of love that it requires. So start that conversation again, or delete them out of your life and concentrate on the ones that are still there. So that's a good little trick that I use. And people always say to me, that's so simple. And I go, well, it shouldn't be too hard. Like, it's hard enough sometimes having the emotional chat. So we've got to have some things along the journey that are just fun and easy, but also very important.
It all comes down to that big G word, doesn't it? Gratitude. It's like just giving gratitude. And we at Empower You, we do a whole section on gratitude. And what we do is we give the kids a piece of paper, even give them 20 minutes, and we give them a pen, and we say, we want you to write a gratitude letter to your parents. And they write this huge letter, then they give it to us and we mail it out to their parents. And, it's magical. The parents get this beautiful letter from their children, just giving gratitude. So that's super important. I am cautious of time. We do have to wrap up. So before we wrap up, finish on my one final question. And what would be your number one piece of advice to an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old? What would be your number one piece of advice to someone listening right now?
Do not worry alone. Do not worry alone. And that means you have to tell someone about how you are truly feeling. So take the mask off, that mask that we live with all the time, trying to cope with the pressures of school, university, relationships with family or boyfriend, girlfriend, or decisions around your sexuality, decisions around where you're going in this world. There's so much going on in that pinnacle 18. You start to drive, you start to drink, people start looking upon you as an adult, all that sort of stuff. If you are worrying alone through that, it makes it so much more difficult. So tell someone, find that one person who's got you for life that you can talk to, warts and all, without any judgment. That would be the number one piece of advice that I'd love to give you. And I'll also realize that every single person's going through stuff. Don't think that mum and dad have got all the answers. Don't think that your boss or your teacher or anyone else in your group have got all the answers. They just might be disguising it better, or they might be having a good time right now. But believe me, we're all going through stuff. So please just don't worry alone. If you don't worry alone, then you're much more likely to get through the type of stuff that life will be throwing at you. And anyone out there, Byron, that's doing the HSC at the moment, just take a big, deep breath and realize that everyone's going through a very difficult time. So just do the best you possibly can. Don't put too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah. And ultimately, the HSC ultimately doesn't even matter too much. If you put in the work and you're confident in what you can do, you'll be fine. I wouldn't that's my biggest message for HSC students. Don't overstress. There's no point. There's no benefit. No. Especially now.
No one's ever asked me for my score, ever.
Exactly. And no one ever will. It doesn't matter too much. But anyway, Gus, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you. This has been a fantastic conversation. I think it's going to be a great conversation for those stuck in lockdown right now. So if anyone wants to find out more about what you do and, get in contact with you, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, Gotcha4Life.org. So that's GOTCHA, the number 4 life, Gotcha4Life.org. And at the moment, we've got a pledge where you pledge who your Gotcha4Life Mate is, and then we'll send information to you, some tips and tricks on how to keep your relationship at that deeper level, the level that you talked about when you drove to Canberra, because we all need little tips and tricks to keep our relationships going. So become a part of the Gotcha4Life family and build your mental fitness, and hopefully we'll save some lives along the way. Like I said, we're challenging everyone to be vulnerable and lead through vulnerability. So love you to be part of the journey. So if you can go there and pledge, that would be fantastic. But I've enjoyed talking to you too, Byron. There's There's a lot of good people out there doing good work, and you're one of them, mate. So thank you, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gus. I'll put all the links in the show notes below, but otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, mate. See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to this entire episode of the podcast. The fact that you would sit there and listen to me for so long is awesome, and I love you for that. Thank you so much. Just real quick, I am starting to speak at schools a lot more frequently now. So if you're in Australia, specifically Sydney, and either you're a student, maybe you're a teacher, or you've got a brother or sister in school, or you have any connections at all and you want me to come speak at a school or any presenting things, I am looking to ramp that up a lot. I've got a really cool school talk I've been working on for a few months now. I've just started speaking at a bunch of schools. It's been going really well. So yeah, go to the link in the show notes or go to drivenyoung.com and you'll see school talks up the top, and just click on that and send me an email. Otherwise, yeah, figure out any way to get in contact with me. I've also got the Sexual Assault podcast, which is now live with Brent Sanders. Go check that out. It's called Consent and Consequences. That is a Driven Young Productions podcast. It's something I'm very proud of. So there's lots going on. Definitely go check it all out. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening to this entire episode, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and week.